All right, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is the first episode of my podcast, and I thought I'd start off with a really good guest. I want to start off with a bang.
Right.
We're gonna start off with the man himself. Let's call him compare him to Heisenberg. Call him to Michael Serleone, the Godfather. Not self-titled, obviously. Band leader of Trials of Ascension. He wrote the Rational Male. Mr. Rollo, how you doing, man?
I think band leader might be a bit much.
Everything
else is
the only
pretty
band
much.
member I know.
Everything else is pretty much accurate. Yeah. No. Hey, thank you for. I didn't realize this was actually your very first episode. This is great. Man.
Yeah, I've done a couple of red carpet.
You're a
interviews.
natural, see. So that's
Thank you.
why.
I've been practicing. Actually, I want to say shout out to Kylie, man. I started doing some interviews, and she was like, "Oh, you're kind of talented at this." I was like, "All right."
She put you up to this?
If Michael's girlfriend can say I'm good at doing some interviews, as I was interviewing some of the playmates, right? I was like, "All right, I guess I can do this, right?" Bad.
You could do it. It's all right.
Yeah, man. But
Gotta start somewhere.
yeah, good to have you here. I just think that I wanted to do this first because you tend to be very misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Especially, right now everybody's kind of attacking you.
Deliberately. It's not misinterpreted if they do it deliberately.
Nah, and pretty much that. Like, they misinterpret you intentionally. They don't read your books, right? There's a lot of people that want to attack you.
Mm-hmm.
Shit, man. Even Andrew, a lot of people reference you and they don't give you credit. And I was like...
Yeah. I get... See, the problem with the red pill right now is there's so many people and so many voices and so many people coming into the space, and it's getting to the point where it's so convoluted that nobody knows where stuff came from. People, like, for instance, like, people think like the red pill started like 4 years ago, like when Andrew Tate showed up and then Pearl shows up and everybody else, and they think it begins and ends with Andrew Tate. And it's I listen to, like, people like Destiny or some of these other guys are just like, oh yeah, the red pill's over. It only had like a 4-month run or 18-month run. And then, people move on to the next thing. I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for 22 years. Like, I'll tell you. How about I tell you when it's over?
Didn't this start like way back with Mystery? I know you had Mystery on on Michael's podcast the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, they were talking about that concept way before.
Well, yeah, I can give you the history of the red pill if you'd like. It really found its beginnings back in really 2001, 2002. And that was in the seduction community days. That's when you had Mystery Method. That's when you had Neil Strauss. That's when you had like David D'Angelo was part of that. RSD, which is Real Social Dynamics with Owen Cook, Tyler Durden. Everybody had a suit. I still have a pseudonym, right? And so it was part of really, that's what I call the forum days. So there were user forums, like there was Alt Fast Seduction, there was So Suave, which was my home forum. That's what I was a moderator at So Suave right up until about 2013, 2014. And really a lot of the stuff that's in my first and second book are from conversations that we had in those forums. I didn't have a blog. I didn't have, the Rational Male wasn't even a blog until 2011. And really that was just because so many people said, you got to start blogging this stuff. You got to start taking it seriously, because everybody had a blog. Like Roosh V had a blog. He was another PUA, right? There was a guy named Royce in DC who later became Chateau Artiste, who he was probably the number one most trafficked blog at the time. I think I was probably number 2 for our niche anyways. And so then it went from the forum years, I tracked that from about like 2002 all the way up to about 2010, 2012. And then you got the blog years where everybody was blogging, and that was a big deal, because you can make a little bit of money off of that if you monetized your blog. But people would read, you had to actually read that during these times. And remember, like, Facebook wasn't even a thing until 2006. And if you look at Twitter right around the same time, social media wasn't what we sort of take for granted today. So social media wasn't as big a deal back then when all of this started as it is right now. Instagram was privately owned. It didn't get bought out by Meta until much later. YouTube was privately owned until Google decided that they wanted to get into the action and bought out YouTube. And then you look at even some of like the dating sites like OkCupid, and if you look at like say Tinder and some of the other dating apps that are right now, they're owned by Match.com. So, and Match.com got their start back in the day when it was people would like write these really long, heartfelt profiles about who they wanted to meet, and and everybody took more time, I think, to sort of like self-analyze and be a little more self-conscious about everything. Nowadays, it's just like oh, he's hot, no, he's not. There used to be a site. I don't know if it's still there. Maybe it's still there. There used to be a website called Hot. Am I hot or not? And it was, you basically upload a picture and people would rate you. Yeah. They would rate you how hot you actually were. And then of course what they would do is they were just data farming back then. But essentially that's what Tinder has become, is sort of like, am I hot or not? It's just in an app form right now. And you go and find that person and fuck that person after you say you're hot or you're not. But that was the blog years. Blog years I tracked from about 2010, 2011 up till 2018 or so, and that's when the social media and YouTube really started becoming what we're doing right now, which we kind of take for granted. So whenever somebody says, "Oh, the red pill's dead, the red pill's over," "Oh, how do you feel about that, Rollo?" It's like, I've outlasted so many people, and I will outlast you. So that's what I have to say about that. But the thing is they just simply don't know the history of it, and I can't really expect them to, because I've been doing this for writing and talking and writing essay. I'm really just an essayist more or less. I'm more of an author than I am really a sort of a personality to be on Access Vegas or whatever. That's something I also do, but I see it as sort of something I use. I just enjoy it, right? But like my main work is actually my books and my writing. So I'm on Substack now too, which is great because it allows me a lot more freedom to sort of write more.
Yeah, I can say you're very good at putting things together. Like, as I've gone through my first year coaches, and I've just heard, kept referencing like Rational Male, right? Like Red Pill, let's start with this. I was like, okay, let me read these books before I make a judgment for it, because even when you watch the movie, right? It's not like The Matrix is not this thing where it's like, yo, this is an ideology, right? It's just like, hey, this is just a thing that kind of opens your mind, and then you can make your choice.
It's an analogy, is what it is.
It's analogies.
I went. Because I had people challenge me on that. They go, "Hey man, the red pill's only been around since like 2018 or something." I'm like, get the fuck out of here. So what I did was I went back through my archive of posts on So Suave, and I was looking, and I specifically looked for search terms like red pill and my name, my Rollo Tomasi, right? Like, what is the earliest instance of me using the term red pill? And it was from December of 2004. Is the first time I used, well, at least on that forum anyways, the first time I ever used the term red pill, right? And we didn't even call it red pill back then. There was no sort of red pill. There wasn't even really what was called a manosphere until like 2013, 2014. But we used to call it the Matrix, because the Matrix movie came out, the first one came out in like 1998. So, and the other ones came out after that. But we were really what the manosphere was back then. Wasn't called the manosphere, but what it was just a bunch of guys who would get together on forums and compare notes. And it was just this aggregate of data from guys from all over the world. Because what do guys want to do? They want to get money, muscles, and game, right? The game part, and how do I get laid? Money, muscles, and game, right? And so you had all these guys for the first time in history come together from all over the world, and they could say like, well, here's how the girls are in Miami. Here's how the girls are in Johannesburg, South Africa. Here's how the girls are in Estonia. Here's how the girls are in, my fishing village in Chile or some shit like that, right? And so guys would get together and they would just compare notes, and it was everything that I get into. When people say, "Oh, it's not real, it's not founded in science and everything," it's like it's founded on 25-ish years of what is a loose science, anyways, and the Matrix analogy really came from these guys who would all get together and they go, well, we're starting to see like distinct, predictable patterns.
The binary code. Right?
Yeah, and all of this. And so when you were quote unquote unplugged from the Matrix, we just called it that. We didn't call it you got red pilled or anything like that. We just said you just got unplugged from the Matrix, because you used to think that this is how girls were. You used to think that this is how the world worked. You were playing by an old set of rules, like this 20th century rule book, and now we're in the 21st century and we have access to data like we've never had before, and we can all get together like all over the world in millions and say, this is what we see is consistently happening. How can we use this, and how can we leverage this this information so that we can, have better relationships. We have better marriages. We can date chicks. We can get laid. Yes, we can use this information to fuck as many chicks as humanly possible. But you can also use it to have a better relationship. You can also use it to get your girlfriend back. You can also use it for so many different things just to improve your life. So it wasn't just about getting your dick wet back then. It was also what. Then it probably was, but like it developed into something that's much more than what it used to be. And so a lot of people can't really appreciate like the term the Matrix or the red pill, because it was just the most apt analogy and metaphor that we could really think of at that time. And so when people say the red pill's this or the red pill's that, it's like they think that it started when Andrew Tate started mouthing off about it in 2002. No, it's not. It's been going on since 2022. It's 20 years before that. And probably even before that. I mean, there was Mystery and Neil Strauss, and they were doing all the things that they outlined in the game, the book, The Game, right? And you got to remember, the book, The Game, came out in 2005. So all the shit that happens in there took place from between like 2002 and 2004. And so you got to remember that all of this stuff has such a long, long history. Like I was looking at Mystery's interview he was on Fresh and Fit, and then he was also on with Mike, which was great. He did the Zoom call and everything. And it was interesting to see him talk about it, because he's still kind of like, I like Mystery quite a bit. I think he's a very likable guy, but it was almost like the guy went into cryo freeze back in 2010 or something. And they thawed him out in 2022 or 2023. And a lot of the stuff he talks about is still very, he doesn't see any difference in like how the methodology now. I mean, the principles and the basics are still the same, but he just does. It seems to me like, anyways, that he doesn't see like how things have updated since the time where getting a girl's phone number was a measure of success, and now it's like follow me on Instagram, right? Well, it's still a measure of success. It's just different.
Mystery's just been doing this for so long. Yeah. I wanted that question because I kept telling Michael, I was like, you need to ask like Owen and Mystery, like how is Social Circle changing, the way that you do things, because now you can, the first thing, right, you want to give even before a phone number is Instagram. That's the first thing.
Yeah, well, I will say this, that Mystery does recognize that. Like he'll say he's good at nuanced things. Like he picks up on process. He's like, he'd probably be a very good chess player. Like he thinks like 3 steps ahead of his opponent. And so like when he's talking about like getting a woman to to follow you on Instagram or whatever, it's like you don't follow her, she follows you, right? There's sort of this like subconscious like reason why you would want her to follow you instead of you follow her, right? Because then it's like you're qualifying to her instead of the opposite way around. Right? And so most guys don't even recognize the importance of just that real very stupid simple act, right? Because it's really an act of frame. It's a frame control. But he sees that because he's been doing this since 2001, 2002. And so now he understands the nuances. He understands the nuances to it. And like a lot of what, like, say Andrew Tate is getting criticized for right now when it comes to like lover boy method or something. If you go and you back to looking at like Mystery Method from 2005, 2007, 2008, somewhere in there, a lot of that, if you looked at it from a perspective of we do today, you would say, oh, this is horribly manipulative. But it's all it depends on the usage of it. It all depends. It's like people have asked me about, well, is the red pill a net benefit to guys, or is it a net negative, or it's just game playing, it's manipulative? And it's like, it can be both. That's the problem.
It's just a tool set.
Well, it's just a tool set, but it's like, I look at it this way. It's like, well, the red pill's like fire, right? You can use it to cook your food and heat your home.
Or burn down a city.
Or you can set yourself on fire and set your neighborhood on fire. However, it's all in the application of it. So can it be manipulative? Yeah, it can. It's like the 48 Laws of Power, right? When the 48 Laws of Power first came out in 98, right? They banned that book from U.S. prisons and penitentiaries, because everybody thought it was an instruction manual
on how to
manual. And it was simply explaining things. It was descriptive as opposed to being prescriptive. I understand how people could read it and go, inmates are going to read this and they're going to take over the prison, right? I understand why they would say that, but the thing is like the data is the data. How you use that, like there's laws of power that I would feel ethically. I wouldn't feel ethically inclined to use those things, but it's important that I know those rules so that they're not used against me, right? So if somebody is using, like, say, what is it? I forget which number it is, but there's a law of power that states, get other people to do the work for you, but claim all the credit, right? It's basically plagiarism. As an author, I don't want people like claiming credit for my fucking work, right?
That makes you cringe a little bit.
It's not that I would use that law of power, but I need to be aware of it because other people might use it against me. So really, the red pill is kind of like, in a sense, it's really descriptive, and it's all in the application of how you use that data and how you use that information.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the same comparison can be made to boxing, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you're not going to go around beating up people, but the people the guys who are fighters and they box, they're just not going to go pick fights.
Yeah.
Like, they know how much power what they do.
Well, it's using it responsibly. Yeah. Like, if you do martial arts, I do Kali. I used to do Taekwondo way back in the day, but mostly Kali. And really, it's meant for just self-defense. Like, you don't go looking for shit, right? I mean, you defang the snake and you get away. That's basically that's the guiding principle, right? You're not there looking for a fight. You're there to end the fight and get away from that. Get away from the dangerous situation. Yeah, situational awareness. And then, like, what do they tell you? Like, you have this ability, we're teaching you how to fight. Now, how you use that is really up to you. Are you going to use it aggressively, or are you going to use it defensively? And really, they stress, you're always going to, it's self-defense is what it is.
Yeah, what do you think about because we said 48 Laws of Power is like a preventative book. What about Rules for Radicals? What do you think about?
Oh, Saul Alinsky? Is
that more of a, hey, that's how you do this?
Old school, man. I think, how many are there? There's like 12 Rules for Radicals or somewhere along those lines. That you got to remember that Rules for Radicals was written in an age of, like, say, 60s sort of radicalism, and it was much more acceptable to be sort of radicalized those days. Like, today, a lot of people think that the red pill is radicalizing, like, incels and these guys who just, you're turning these guys into dangerous, killing machines. It's like, well, what about, if that's the case, then we need to ban that book, and we need to ban Rules for Radicals, the Anarchist Cookbook. I mean, if that's the case, we start with some of the more dangerous books. If that's what you believe, I don't necessarily believe that. But the fact that we're going to turn incels into, like, the new radicalized criminals, is really just it's all based on money structures right now. Like, people who's getting paid. If there is no boogeyman, no one gets paid. And so when I look at, like, say, Rules for Radicals, it's funny to me to see how many people, I think a lot of people sort of instinctually use those rules as it is, because it seems like it is a better fit, or you learn them sort of instinctively or naturally through social media.
Like ridicule.
Ridicule is every, there's no defense against ridicule. I think it's number 3, right? And so and it's never been easier to crowdsource ridicule than it is today, right? So if you get and even if you don't have a lot of followers, you can still have AI do it for you. So that's definitely one part of it. And then there's what is it? Know your opponent's rules and make them stick to their rules more. But call them hypocrites of their own rule set. I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm just trying to remember some of the rules that are in Rules for Radicals. I think it was, for its time, it was probably akin to 48 Laws of Power, but it was really more, actually I shouldn't even say that, it was more akin to 33 Strategies of War, which is another book by Robert Greene. It's like, here's how you use these principles to fight a battle, to whether that's destroying your rival or it's initiating social change, right? So Saul Alinsky, I think, is very important for a lot of guys to read, as far as, like, Rules for Radicals is concerned. But again, to know what's being used against you, so that not that you would necessarily use every single one. Maybe it would, but it's important to know that, so that when it comes time for them to ridicule you, go, okay, here, this is the ridicule part. Thanks, and then you can catch them in their own bullshit, because usually what they're using is, like, AI chat bots to ridicule you.
Yeah, I think like, when you know what's being used against you. For example, book 3, right? Positive Masculinity, as well as Religion. Like, when I read those books, I was like, now I understand why, like, the programming, like, why these movies kind of have the same narrative, the same plot lines. And that's what intrigued me the most, especially for book 3, right? You would talk about the decades.
Mm-hmm.
You would talk about the decades where the 60s, the hippies, so it's more of a feminization of men, right? The long hair, the beards.
It's generational.
Yeah, and then it went to the 70s, where I imagine it was Rocky, right? It's more rock
disco
bands.
era.
Yeah, Aerosmith started popping off. So it's
Studio
more,
54.
yeah. But then, what do you think about right now, like 90s, 2000s?
Well,
did it swing back, or did it swing?
I kind of address that in religion, in the introduction of religion as well. Is I make a distinction between 20th century thinking and 21st century thinking. So when we look at all of the things that led up to where we are right now in the 21st century, we're in a kind of a revolutionary age, and I don't think a lot of people really recognize this. Is that we have access to more information now as a human collective. We have more access to information now than at any other time in human history. And in my 4th book, I'm glad you read book 3, by the way, because I never get to talk about positive masculinity all that much. But in book 4, in the introduction, I started out by describing what happened during I think it was the mid 1400s, and it was the Gutenberg press, right? It was movable type. So no longer did we have to write out a manuscript. If you wanted the Bible back then, you had to go to some Franciscan monk who could write the whole damn thing out for you. That's all they did all day long were scribes, is just make copies of the book of the Bible by hand writing it. Well, now we have movable type, and we can make prints. They used to do block prints, but they never figured out how can we put each one of these letters or characters as a print piece. Now, me still am a graphic designer by trade and an art director by trade. I'm fascinated with stuff like that because I'm old school when it comes to leading and kerning, and I know all of the scientific jargon for printing. But all of those came from the Gutenberg press, and the Gutenberg press was a revolutionary invention because what it did is it raised the literacy rate of Western Europe, skyrocketed. You want to know why Western societies went from zero to hero so quickly? It was almost single-handedly due to print, right? And so what did they do? They start printing the Bible. That's the first thing they're going to do is print the Bible, right? Catholic Church Roman Catholic Church loved that during that time. But then, of course, what happens is you got Martin Luther, who now has access to the Bible, and that's caused the Protestant Reformation. Now you've got wars as a result of all of this information that's being spread out. Why is the Catholic Church giving plenary indulgences and stuff like that? And of course, what happens is now you've got Catholics versus Protestants, and it essentially started wars as a result of it. But it also, so there's one application that was pretty detrimental to human society. But then they're also printing science manuals and printing poetry, fiction, whatever was popular, and so the literacy rate climbs. And because what they're really doing is disseminating information, and when you do that, when you give average people, you democratize information, it causes social change and social upheaval sometimes. That's exactly what happened when the internet started to go bigger, because now it's not just printing, it's we have access to
everything.
Information that the layperson has never had access before. For instance, I was born in 1968, so I'm on sort of the cusp between the 20th century and the 21st century. So I know, look, when I was getting my degree, I knew how difficult it was to have to go to the library, look up the books that you needed to, so you could quote this stuff and make sure you got everything squared away. There was actually a reason to have a college university library there. It still is today, but you had to go and do everything by reading it and interpreting it, highlighting the passages that you needed to, so that you could write a research paper, so that you could even just write a book report if you wanted to, right? Now you could just simply go and download the PDF, and you can have it right there on your phone if you want to and read it. And I have the reason why I was able to do The Rational Male and all the rest of the 5 books that I have is because I was born in a time where I was able to have access to that information. I'm not an evolutionary psychologist. I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I'm not an anthropologist, a sociologist, a neurological neurologist, an endocrinologist. I'm not any of those things, but I have access to all the research and all the information, and all I got to do is type into Google, say, give me the latest research information on why men and women's brains are structurally, architecturally different. Bam! Within less than a seventh of a second, it pops up, right? And so now I can use that for my next essay, so I can connect dots that couldn't be connected before. So we're looking at, I think, in terms of history, like what happened in the 20th century. We didn't have access to that, and you had to do it. Like if you were going to be like, one of the reasons I think Mike quotes Dr. David Buss so much is because he cut his teeth in the 70s, man. And so when he quotes Evolution of Desire, that book, you got to remember, that book was published in 1994. And so all of the research and all of the studies that he did that ended up in that book took place in the late 80s and early 90s. No internet, no social media, no Google, nothing even remotely like that. And so he had to go and do all of that work by hand. Now he's updated those things since then. But that's one of the reasons why I still kind of have a lot of respect. And I think a lot of people who even hate Dr. David Buss still have a lot of professional respect for him because he's dedicated his life to it. Now, a schmuck like me who's got a degree in behavioral psychology and a BFA, a Bachelor of Fine Arts, I can go and write books that are based on his data and his work. So we're building on top of, even if I'm just asking the right questions, that's often enough so that it launches people into thinking about other concepts as a result of that. So we're in a revolutionary age right now, and people just simply take it for granted. We have in my, I have a cell phone down here. In this phone right here, you have access to the entire world's database right now. And even if you don't know what to ask for, AI is right there to help you do it anyways, right? So this is like, to have something like this in your hand. If I wish to take this back to like 1975 and
Just
say,
blow people's minds.
I've got this, they would call you the devil. They would think they would burn you at the stake, right? Or they wouldn't believe you that you had all this information. And today we just, like, a 9-year-old kid has access to information that it took, countless centuries, millennia, for men and women to sort of collect, and now we have it. And you know what we do? We look up fucking cat videos, and we jerk off to Pornhub,
we look up OnlyFans.
We look up Access Vegas and say, what are these hoes doing today?
Yeah, I think what gives you, Michael, I think what gives you and Michael so much legitimacy is the reference experience combined with the research. That's why I started reading the books. That's why when Michael was like, hey, you guys got to read the Dr. David Buss books, all these other books, is like, you got to put together this with the reference experience. Because what I keep seeing in these forums is some people would read your book lightly and they'll say, oh, this is what I guess like the red pill is. And I'm like, none of you guys have ever even been like consistently talking to models, women. Like I worked in nightlife for, now it's like 5 years. So I was there, and I've had my fair share of coaches. I've worked with a couple of coaches as well. And then when I started reading, Dr. David Buss's books, as well as your material, like, it just kind of put all those pieces together. I was like, so this is why, like, when I go to church, like, this is why they say these things. This is why these standards are here. This is why, it's funny enough, like, any movie you watch, it kind of follows the same plot line, the same kind of evil psych, like, principles.
Once you put on the red pill lens, you can't take it off.
Yeah, how do you watch movies and
how do you listen? How do you listen to music that you used to like when you were a kid?
You just can't do it.
And you listen to the lyrics and you go, God, this is cringe. And you used to sing that shit at the top of your lungs in your fucking shower before you went to high school, right? You used to love these for me, like 80s power ballads, yeah. And then you go,
you're like, oh man,
this is kind of simpy.
Fuck, man, that's just simpy.
And it's like, but it's so catchy, and and then you realize that there's a reason why you still have it stuck in your head, is because you had it. Well, first you had a different outlook on life, and when you pair that message up with some semi-decent music, you're installing new sort of like programming in people's heads, right? This is the way things ought to be. And it's not to say that it's a bad or a good thing. It can be both, right? But it's somebody who's trying to sort of express what they're going through at that particular time in their lives, and they don't really realize, like, later on, I tell guys, like, it's okay to like listen to the old music that you like, right? If you really are into this, find new music, please. But if you really like that stuff, enjoy it for what it is. But if nothing else, when you're listening to it, or if you say, oh, I can't listen to that song anymore, or I can't watch that movie, or I can't read that book anymore and enjoy it anymore, because I don't align with what the message of that thing is, it's okay to enjoy it for what it is, but just as long as you know that there's a reason why you enjoyed it. There's a reason why at the time you thought it was the best thing in the fucking world. and now you've moved on. If anything, it should be a reminder to you for how far you've progressed since you were. Yeah, I'm gonna sing.
Yeah, and I understand the push pull more. I'm like, oh, this is by Jim Morrison, right? Even Ozzy would be, it's also more of the seduction too. It's like, oh, I can't have you, you can have me.
Well, I think what's interesting is we don't, unless it's like, okay, one of my guilty pleasures is Steel Panther. I love Steel Panther because they're fun, they're upbeat, they're party rock. And the music, the lyrics are all goof lyrics. They're all meant to be parody. They're all meant to be some of it's pretty accurate, but the way that Michael Starr writes the lyrics and everything. He sounds like, why do all my lyrics sound like Dr. Seuss, right? Yeah. And the reason for that is I enjoy their, it's like I said, it's a guilty pleasure. I enjoy their music because I can appreciate it for what it is, but it's also radical in the sense that like you have to play a character, you have to be a goof, you have to be a parody to actually do shit or to write music or write lyrics that would actually make people think, like Poontang Boomerang, right? Or I'm trying to think of the other one, like party like it's the end of the world, right? That kind of stuff. That kind of stuff doesn't play well with people who are like constantly, obsessing over shit on Twitter or obsessing over shit on Instagram. This is degeneracy. No, it's a parody, you asshat. We've lost our collective sense of humor somewhere around 2017, 2018, and everybody is this literalist, autistic, Asperger's syndrome guy who is just looking at shit and can't appreciate poetry, can't appreciate metaphors or even the Matrix for that matter, right? Can't appreciate things because everything is like pared down to its most literal sense because people don't want to feel like they're having the wool pulled over their eyes. They don't want to feel like, well, I wouldn't listen to Steel Panther because it's moral degeneracy and blah, blah. It's like, it's a parody, man. Enjoy it for what the fuck it is. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, you gotta understand that art is just art. And this is the thing that I have a problem too with a lot of recent music and too. It just tries to get too political. And being around artists, I know that artists don't fucking read. Like most artists are not.
Most people don't read in general.
Most artists, right? They're stuck in the studio 2 hours a day, and they're not even reading the books. They don't know anything about science, and they just want to comment on these.
I was on with Marquette from Satan Center podcast on his show not too long ago, and he was saying, like I was explaining to him what the red pill's about. It's a praxeology. It's not an ideology. It's not a belief set. It's not a religion. It's not a cult. It's not a philosophy. It's not you're preaching this or teaching that. It is just data. It's the same thing as like 48 Laws of Power. Can you use it to burn your house down? Yes. Can you use it to heat and cook your home? Yes, you can do that. You can do both of those things with that. But everybody wants to find some moral reason why they should be against or should be for the red pill or against the red pill. There's always this sort of moral imperative as to should you be able to read 48 Laws of Power in prison? That's essentially what they're arguing. Is it a moral imperative to do that? And I was talking to Marquette about this, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to explain to him in great detail. Okay, there is no bumper sticker for the red pill. There is no elevator pitch for the red pill. You can't.
There's no meeting.
It's a college course. Yeah. It's a college major is what it is, and you have to, if you really want to appreciate it for what it is, and you really want to use it to sort of initiate change in your life. I'm not saying you have to get into the point where you're like doing podcasts and writing your own books, but you have to at least have the patience enough to read. And Marquette's like, nobody reads today, bro. I go, you know what? You're right. Nobody does because everybody, even Mike will tell you he listens to all of his books on audio at like 7 speed. I'm like, I could do that if I was listening to something like that was instructional or if it was like nonfiction. If I'm listening to fiction, it's played at 1 speed at the speed it was recorded at because I want to be able to savor the listening to a good work of fiction, right? Which I think as a writer, it's one of the great tragedies of a lot of these guys who come into the red pill space. They think that reading fiction is like a waste of time. I'm like, no, it is absolutely necessary. As half the stuff that I talk about or a lot of the stuff I talk about in my religion book, I quote passages from Dune. In my before the movie came out, right? I've read Dune probably like 6 or 7 times since I was like 12 years old, right? And there's a lot of like really kind of profound like quotes from that book. I quote from other sources as well, science fiction. Like in religion, I quote Arthur C. Clarke. What is it? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I use that as a launching point for one of my chapters in that book. If I hadn't read that, I would like he's a futurist for sure, but he's a science fiction writer. So it's not that you can't glean wisdom and knowledge from works of fiction. It just depends on what you're probably not going to get it from Mean Girls, but you might get it from like, Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke or Heinlein or something like that.
Yeah, when we're talking about like films, right? Like classics, because I was looking back and I was like, let me see like how the programming is like. Like one of the first ones that I was like, oh man, I just noticed this so much. Like I watched this classic movie, you've probably seen it, The Graduate.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, man, this is just classic. This is fucking classic case of like this is fucking classic case of like epiphany phase and like the man, right? He's a virgin, so he kind of gets infatuated with the older lady, and the older lady, like what you pointed out in was it book 2 and book 3, is like when women hit early 40s and their daughter goes to college, they kind of want to relive that. And I was like, man, this shit is so like I know where this is gonna go, man.
I forget what show we were on. It was me and Mike were on it, and it might have been Adam Sosnick's show, but we were on there and you get a variety of different age groups for the girls. Hell, we do here. But I think we were on that show, and some older lady was talking about how she was like 40 and her boyfriend was like 24, 25. And Mike goes, oh, so Mrs. Robinson then? She was like, huh? Like they did not understand the reference. Even Sosnick didn't understand the reference. And it's like, but I think, and it's not because we're like super, big. Oh, check out the big brain on Mike or Rollo, right? But I think that one of the reasons like Mike and I click so well as sort of a team is we both have a lot of the same interests. We've both seen a lot of the same movies. We both read a lot of the same books, right? So he'll make a joke like, "Oh, you're Mrs. Robinson." I'll be like, and they'll be like, "Huh?" And I think we presume, like, I didn't realize this because you were talking about Kylie before. I didn't realize this until Mike really started seriously dating Kylie. There is a let's say a generational difference.
Like a gap,
I'm 55 now. I'll be 56 on April 2nd. So my birthday's coming up, right? And so I'm 50. I'll be 56. Mike's 46. Sterling Cooper's 36, right? I hang out with Sterling. I hang out with Mike. I hang out with people. I hang out with Robert Kiyosaki, who's 76, right? So I don't really see sort of like this generational thing, but I'm reminded of it. Whenever I talk to Kylie,
one of the younger girls here,
I make some. I'd say some movie quote from like Predator or Aliens or something, something like that. Some like classic '80s kind of like maybe Kindergarten Cop. He's not a tumor, What the fuck are you guys talking about?
Like when you reference the movie Mr. Mom, I was like, I just watched that one, and like that's one of the few movies where I can say like the gender roles were kind of positive, because in the end it was like, okay, the girl doesn't like being in the office, and the guy, like, he still figures it out, but he's still being a man even though he's at home.
When we do Access Vegas, I just did this by accident one time, and it just stuck. But when I do my intro music for my show, I always put like a movie quote, or I put something that's sort of pertinent to what I'm getting into. Like it could be like from Gladiator, where it's like, "Are you not entertained?" Then it'll go into the theme song, right? Well, I did that with the Access Vegas theme song, and I used one of my old ones, which was Jesse Ventura in Predator, when he was talking about, hey, you want some I don't know if you've ever seen Predator, but in Predator, the team is inside a Huey helicopter, right? And they're getting ready for their drop, and he's passing around chewing tobacco. And he's like, yeah, you guys are a bunch of slack-jawed faggots and stuff like that. And then one of the things he says is, this stuff will make you a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus, just like me. And that was the quote that I put in front of the thing. Me and Mike instantly gets it, like, because he's hurt, because he's watched the thing. I get it. We can appreciate it. Every girl on the table is like, where the fuck is this coming from? Because they don't know what the reference is, because they're either from a different generation, or they weren't even born for like 10 years, 20 years after that movie was out in like 1988, 89, something like that.
Yeah, that happens when I hang out with
and I'm expecting them to get it.
Yeah, anytime I hang out with models, like anytime I hang out with the models, and they just, well, now I get it too, because like anytime I hang out with the models, they quote like, let's say Mean Girls, like, or they quote like Clueless, and now I'm like, oh shit, that, like, especially the mid 20s, 30s girls. Now that I've seen those movies, I'm like, okay, this is what makes me connect easier with them.
Or you can quote. I'll tell you, this is going to sound really bad. Or you can quote things like from Disney Channel, from like Hannah Montana, or from like Fairly Odd Parents, or something from Nickelodeon from back in the day. Now I know what those are from because my daughter's 25, and I grew up. I helped her grow up with that stuff, so I can make one of those references, and the girls will go, "Oh, you watched this when you were a kid?" I'm like, "Baby, my daughter was as old as you were when I was watching," so they still kind of get that. But I think what's funny, and Mike brought this up, is that when a guy is older and he's dating a younger girl, one of the first things like older women will say is like, "What are you going to talk about? You know, you guys aren't intellectually matched, or she's not going to. What would you have to ever talk about? You're robbing the cradle." He's 46. She's 20.
They think like 22. Michael doesn't know how to work a computer. They're like, "Oh, you're 46." it's like when you're trying to explain to your grandma how to reconnect the Wi-Fi.
Exactly. And what's funny is like he brought this up, and I thought this was great. Is that the best pairing between a man and a woman, even as far back as Aristotle said this, I believe it was like 37, 38, and the woman is 18. And by today's standards, women would lose their shit over shit. But back then, it wasn't that big a deal. And the reason why is because it takes longer for a man to mature into his peak potential than it does for women to mature into their peak potential. When, as I've said in multiple books, when women get to be about the age of 22, 23, that's when they're starting to hit the peak, the apogee of their sexual market value and their sexual agency, and really their power as a woman. Not to say that women can't enhance that power in other ways, but most women draw their power from their sexual agency. And when does that peak? 22, 23, 24 years old, right? That, I think, was pretty self-evident even as far back as Aristotle's time. And so when Mike says, "I like to be able to take Kylie to Paris or to this place or to Tulum.
I want you to be the first one that I take
that she's never been to, and she's having this experience with him, and he's been there before, and he goes, "Hey, there's this really great cafe around the corner here. When I was in the Air Force, we used to go here all the time," right? And then he would go and share that kind of experience, share that life experience with her. Or he will say like, I want to share like classic movies with her, or I want to talk about like, I don't know, his time when he was in the military, planes from the Air Force. At the strip club. Yeah, it's strip club. Whatever it is, those kinds of things. And so he already has this wealth of experience that he's sharing with a woman. And by the way, that's also the core tenet of Frame. So to have a world into which that woman wants to enter into. And it really gave me pause to think is that I stress Frame from my very first book. It's the very first Iron Rule of Tomasi, which is Frame is everything, right? Have a world, have a life, have built something for yourself into which that woman wants to enter into. Because if you don't, then you're entering into her frame. She doesn't want that to happen. She wants to be in your world, not the other way around. And so when Mike already has like 20 some odd years on Kylie, then he's already established this world. He's already established himself as a man, right? And now he can share that world with a woman who's worthy of being, can appreciate that particular.
Like all she's basically doing is like, you're hopping on the cruise ship. Is like, come on, you just enjoy the ride. We already got everything going. Everything's functioning.
And here's the better part is not only that, but I also love you. And I also want to take care of you, and I want to share this life with you, and I also want to, I want you to be in this frame if you want to be in this frame, right? And this is what it's about. And he's, first of all, Mike's no homo. He's a good-looking dude. He's got a lot of money. He's had a lot of life experience. He's a great personality. He's very educated. I mean, what's not to like about fucking Mike, right? Do you want to be a part of this, or do you not want to be a part of this? And clearly Kylie wants to be. I'll tell you what's funny is like when I first met Kylie and I met Mike, Mike's like, "Yeah, I got a new girlfriend, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "You have a girlfriend?" Because I knew what he was about from before, right? Yeah. And I'm like, "You have a girlfriend?" He goes, "Yeah." I was like, I met her at Swimsuit USA, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, "Okay, cool." And I was kind of like, this ain't gonna, because I knew Mike. I was like, this is going to last like 2 months, 3 months. But it didn't. And then once I met her, I understood why. I understand why they clicked so well together, because their personality types are very very like, let's say, complementary to one
Yeah, and
another.
she's very motivated to be part of his life.
Very much so. And she's a team player. She's on board. I think she appreciates and can really appreciate what his frame has to offer for her. But also, as a result of that, she falls in love with the guy too. So that's a benefit as well.
Yeah, and apart from you being here, that's what I also respected when I was like, okay, Rollo's like been married for a while, and the way that you talk about your dynamic is the same way that I say that's very different today for couples. Like the way that they're raised, like they don't know how to function together. But it's the same way that I would say like my parents, grandparents, like they're more from a traditional South American community, right? So it's like
Latin culture.
Yeah, Latin culture, and they're very motivated to do things for one another. It's like a team. So it's like, if like we said, like if you don't know how to do something, the woman genuinely desires to do something. Like my mom and dad are from different parts of the country in Ecuador. Mom didn't even know how to cook when they got married, but she called the auntie, right? She called grandma. She's like, look, my husband, he's away right now because he's in the Navy, right? When he comes back, I want to be able to know how to do this dish. This very traditional Ecuadorian dish from the coast. How do I make it, right? And those are the things that I forget which book it was. It says you want to get a woman that is more stingy with money. It's like same thing, right? She's like, okay, husband's stacking all the bread. He went to war. When he comes back, I'm gonna invest the money in the stocks. I'm gonna do something that
invest in talent. Somebody who's like frugal, someone who is
frugality. Yeah, Millionaire Next Door.
But
That's
also
where it comes from.
A good investor, right?
Yeah, that's where it comes from. Millionaire Next Door.
I'll tell you, I one time I was talking with I was in the Lamborghini with Fresh from Fresh from Fit, and we were driving around and we were having this conversation. Sometimes he'll like film it for Instagram or something, but we had this conversation, and I said, Fresh, when was the last? Because he was going through the whole Miranda thing because he had a girlfriend, and people were like, oh, you got a girlfriend, you're simping. Oh, you can't have a girlfriend if you're Myron or Fresh, apparently. I said, look, is she a compliment to your life? He says, yes. I said, is she the focus of your life? He said, no. I said, then vaya con Dios, man. Go have a relationship, right? And then I asked him this. I said, when's the last time that a woman has ever like given you a birthday present and she took the time to figure out what you liked without actually having to have the conversation about it, right? So if I play a certain kind of guitar, or if I play, or if I'm into a certain sports team, or if I'm into a certain kind of hobby or whatever it is, and I don't like talk about it all the time. I might talk about it with my friends. I just don't like, let on. When was the last time a woman would buy you a gift for something that she knows you like, but she had to have the insight and had to have the interest to say, okay, I know he really likes this particular brand of strings for his guitar, or this particular sports team. And it's not like he talks about it with me, but I know he likes that. And so I'm going to get him some memorabilia. I'm going to get him this particular thing for his hobby. I'm going to get him something that he doesn't know that I know is something that's really important to him, but I'm going to do it anyway. So because I love him and I have compassion for him and everything else. And I want him to know, like, go that extra mile to get to know that guy, rather than have it be, oh, it's about my needs and everything else. It's how many women will take the time and have the insight to go and like purchase something, or to buy a gift, or to even say, like, give a compliment in some way about something that she notices or sees in that guy that maybe he's never had that conversation with her before. And it would take her sort of act of desire and will to want to do that. I said, when's the last time something like that happened? I put it in the terms of a birthday present, right? And he's like, I don't think I've ever had that happen. And I go, yeah. I said, because most guys are always playing to like make the girl happy, to meet her needs. So it's always this one-sided thing. Now, remember what I said about frame? For Kylie to be in the frame of Mike, she has to want to be in that frame to begin with. And as you're saying, she's a good team player. She knows what she's supposed to do. She took her some time to sort of catch up to that, to understand what she needed to do. But she wanted to. That's what I'm saying. It's like there's that innate natural desire to want to get to know him, to want to say, okay, well, he was in the Air Force. Maybe I'll give him an Air Force medallion. Maybe I'll give him something that is pertinent to his interests that he doesn't know that I know about him. But I do, because I love him and I'm interested in him. And so therefore I'm going to go and do these things because I want to do these things, as opposed to I better meet his needs. Like, it's not an obligation. It's like an innate desire to want to do those things.
Yeah, it's a want.
And
Right.
because
like you're building a new shed because you're like, oh, my wife wants to do gardening and stuff, but I'm gonna do it generally, not because I want her approval, because I want to do it.
Because because I want to be in this. And I think that one of the bad raps that the red pill really gets right now, as I was saying before, is that you can use it to better your relationships. You can use it to destroy your relationships. It's all in the application of it, right? And so, as you're saying before, I've been married for 27 and a half years now, and I attribute a good portion of my very long-lasting, good, fundamentally functional, healthy, happy relationship to understanding the nature of my wife and understanding female nature and being able to say, you know what, I'm going to do this right now. I know how she's going to be when I get home. I know how it's going to be, how she is right now. I know how this is going to affect her. I know her personality as a person, but I also know her nature as a woman. Most guys only know the personality. They don't know the nature of that woman and how they should be able to sort of like either to act themselves or what to expect from the woman too, because it's not a one-way street.
Yeah, the track cons, right?
Yeah, it's not just a one-way street.
You gotta be a certain way.
Well, the traditional conservatism is based on transactional sex. I do these things, I get laid. That's basically what it's basically.
I take out the trash. You give me a little brownie point.
Yeah, that's why they love shit like the love languages. Oh, my love language is acts of service. No, that's just something you do just because you do it, right? It's not about love languages or any of this other shit. It's about genuine complementarity between men and women. First off, and by the way, that's something I've stressed for a long time: is men and women are better together than we are apart. Oh, is that radical Rollo Tomasi, radicalizing guys with that? No, it should be just a self-evident fact. I mean, I don't even need some moral reason to prove that men and women are innate, natural, evolved complements to one another. I can just look at how our brains are architectured. I can look at endocrinology. I can look at like sort of the nuts and bolts of human nature and come to that conclusion. Now, if you need a Bible or you need the Quran or you need the Talmud or whatever it is to explain that, by all means, go with that. But it's the ends are still the same, right? So how you come to it is really what they have a problem with. But again, it's like you can have you will have a better, healthier relationship if you know the stuff in my book. You'll have a better understanding of your mom and your sister or maybe your female coworkers if you are red pill aware. Right? And a lot of people think that it's just about getting your dick sucked. It's not. It's about living a better life. I've used game to get out of fucking traffic tickets, man, or get out of speeding tickets. Right? I have used elements of game in my business. I have used elements of game in my personal relationships, and not just like with my mother-in-law, for fuck's sake, right? So there's so much application to it, but there's this fucking tunnel vision right now, especially on social media, where it's like everybody wants to hate on the red pill, but they just don't see the broader scope of what the red pill actually is. And when I see a relationship like, say, between Kylie and Mike, and I understand the complementarity between the two of them, and I understand why it works. Meanwhile, all these bitches at the table going, "Oh, you're robbing the cradle, half plus 7," or whatever it is. I'm just like, no, it works, and you're pissed off. You're pissed off that it works because Mike's red pill aware, and he understands Kylie's nature, and not just her nature, but also her personality. So.
The audio's good? Oh, okay. I thought it cut off for a second.
That's good.
Yo, how do you... Because I know you're here in Vegas, right, man? Michael's taking you to White Republic, man, all these competitions. And you're more so, right, you're in a band. Like, how do you deal with that? How's that contrast? Because I've been to some concerts here.
Easy.
I've been to some concerts here, like metal concerts, and like just the difference of crowds is
at Vamp
huge.
or at House of Blues. Because those are two very different
I went to this this band called Sun, man. It's like this black metal band, and of course they're more underground, right? The guys that go there is like,
oh, that's right. You're Ecuadorian, so you guys are all into like that.
No, I went here. It was here in LA, yeah.
Sepultura.
And I went to that concert. It was huge contrast. I was like, yo, like, I was just talking, like, everybody's super like socially anxious, like kind of awkward. I'm like, man, I was hanging out with fucking supermodels yesterday. Now I'm watching this black metal band. Like, what is life, man? Like, how do you deal with those crowds? Like, you've seen the difference, right?
Have you seen this meme? There's this. I laugh because I sent this. CJ's the other guitarist in Trials of Ascension. I sent this meme to him. Some guy had his effects pedals, like I forget what it was. Somebody took a picture of this, but the dude had taped this message onto the front of his pedal board, and it said, "Stop obsessing over my pedals and go talk to some girls." And then CJ got a kick out of that because it's like I'm Rollo Tomassi, right? But it's I get what you're saying. I can go. I have to wear a lot of hats. Like I have to really kind of redirect my personality a lot, because when I am talking with my wife or I'm talking with my daughter, I'm daddy, right? I'm husband. This is who I am, right? But when I do Access Vegas, I'll be Rollo Tomassi, but I'll be Rollo Tomassi like sort of the more entertainer guy. Then I'm Rollo Tomassi, the author. Like right now, we're just bullshitting, right? So it's like I can sort of like let my hair down and talk. But when I go to Wet Republic, that's another thing. And of course, everybody wants to say, well, look, Rollo's selling moral degeneracy, and then the same day or the day after, we'll be talking about religion. And it took me 3 years to write religion because I knew I had to be bulletproof and I'm citing all my sources and everything else. And I'm meticulous about that. So I can write that, but then I can go to Wet Republic the next day and people will go, "Oh, look, what is his wife? Doesn't he know he's married?" You know, I'm like, yeah, my wife knows I'm married. She understands what I do. I told my wife from day one, I said, like, I can't promise you I'll ever be a millionaire, but your life will never be boring. I can tell you that right now. Your life will never be boring. But so, yeah, I mean, she understands that. My wife is cool. She's you know, we're both in our 50s. She's very good looking. We keep ourselves in shape for each other. I get to the gym. I'm on TRT. Yes, thank you very much. Courtesy of Mike. But then I'll go to, like, after this, I'll go to Powerhouse Gym and I'll work out with Hide Yamagishi, who is IFBB world champion from 2023. And just hang out with him, get some, you know, start absorbing some knowledge from people who know something more than I do, right? I can also be the student. I'm not always the master. In fact, I'm probably the student more than I am the master. So when I go to Powerhouse and I'm talking to Iris Kyle or I'm talking to Hide, you know, I defer to their authority to say, hey, what can I do to, like, you know, get my gains up or something like that? Or what can I do to, like, I want to cut for the summer. They're going to tell me that. If it's about crypto, if it's about my money situation, I'll go and I'll talk to my friend Trader SZ, or I'll talk to Miguel Munoz from Dollar Cost Crypto, Cultivate Crypto, or Charlie for that matter. Then I also know I'm really close personal friends with Robert Kiyosaki. Ken McElroy, George Gammon, Jason Hartman, all these guys are just like, I think probably of all those guys, I'm pretty sure that Ken McElroy is probably close to a billionaire. If not, he's pretty close to that. So if I want to get my money on point, or I have questions about like how to avoid taxes this year, like I'm going to go talk to these guys, right? So I'm not the master of all things. I call myself a jack of all trades, a master of some. And I think that's probably a better place to be, instead of just like specializing in one thing and just like sticking the, you know, tunnel vision for one thing. And I think that's probably the biggest problem that a lot of my critics have, is like they'll see me doing something with George Gammon, or they'll see me do something with Robert Kiyosaki. I did a full interview with Robert Kiyosaki inside of his private jet last summer, and then we came in here and finished up the rest of it. Then we go out to MGM and have dinner and everything, and people go, "Oh, there's Rollo Tomassi and Robert Kiyosaki." So, and then, like, for instance, I'm going to be going to see Tim Pool next week. We are also in talks with Tom Bilyeu right now, where me and Mike are going to go do an interview with Tom Bilyeu. Bilyeu, I hope I'm saying your name right. So we can go and do those things, and then come in here and shout across the table at, you know, girls with fake tits. So it just depends, you know. It's like I said, it's never boring.
It's really about like embracing that paradox. Because like I said, like me doing photography, I got to be in so many places, different times. And, you know, if I'm like, hey, look, does this conflict with like religion? Like, I'm hanging out with a bunch of porn stars. I'm like, look, I'm here. Like, I got to embrace the fact that, you know, I'm human as well. You got these drives, but you can also try to, you know, just be your best. be your best self, right?
I think what's funny is like I'll get a lot of one of the hot topics is always a fucking hot topic in red pill spaces is like body count and oh, she's a 304, she's run through, she's not marriage material, and all this other stuff. And it's like they get all the like these are guys. Most of the guys saying this are guys that like most women aren't going to have anything to do with to begin with. But be that as it may, once you get past like 45, 49, somewhere around there, all the pretentious bullshit about like body count, I don't care. Does she want to fuck or not? Like, is she like into it or not? Right. Is she into me because she has a natural innate desire for me? Or is she into me because she wants something from me? Is she into me because she feels like she's obligated? And I don't like, it's not like I fuck any of the girls on the show or I'm out, trying to run game on girls at Access or at Wet Republic, right? It's more like catch and release, right?
Yeah, when you gain more experience, you just know what signals you're getting.
And to me, it's I enjoy the conversation. I get to the point where I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm glad you brought up the music part too, because there was a time when I was in my 20s that I was a musician and I had to learn so many things to be a musician, right? Not only did I have to play my instrument, I had to learn how to write songs. I had to learn how to write lyrics. I had to be an engineer. I had to be a stage guy. I had to learn how to look good on stage, right? I got to stay in shape. You got to know psychology because you're in a band with 4 or 5 other people, with 3 or 4 or 5 other people in the band. You've got to be able to be a good promoter. You've got to be able to, you might even have to book the tour, how are we going to get from point A to point B? Do you have a truck? Yeah. Do you have that? Salesman, everything. You think about all the things that go into, and all anybody sees is some guy shaking his ass on stage and go, oh man, money for nothing and your chicks for free. No, but you know how much fucking work goes into this? 90% of the stuff that I learned how to be like, the way I learned to be a graphic designer was back in the day in like the late 80s, early 90s. There was no Instagram. There was no.
Were you doing fanzines? Like you were cutting up the letters and putting.
You could do that, but you would have to make. I had to learn how to make flyers because that's the only way you could promote a show. You have to go down where all the chicks. It was fun to do.
Stick them at the strip. You go to Sunset Strip and you got to put them on
There's
the.
Probably
on the pole.
Still flyers like stuck to that pole.
Yeah.
But everybody, because I'm a pretty good artist, right? So I did all of this stuff for my bands, and then other bands would see that I was doing these, like, oh man, this is great. You did the art for this? Yeah, I did. Like, oh, you should be in comics, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. He's like, will you do my flyers for my band? Sure, I'll do them for your band so I can pay for the next gig so I can get from the next gigs. And that's really how I got into graphic design, was doing typography and illustration for just to Xerox flyers off for other people because I was really good at it. And so I learned I could pay for what I wanted to do if I was helping other guys do what they wanted to do. And it sort of taught me the business side of it as well. I didn't realize it at the time. I just did it because I thought it was fun, right?
Solving the problem.
And it was great because it got me down to the strip where the hot chicks were because I just wanted to get laid. And that's really all it was about back then. Is like, I'm willing to do all this stuff, not necessarily because it pays well, because there was no money in it for sure. But if it meant you could party with hot chicks and you could get laid on a semi-regular basis, I was all the motivation that I needed back then. Today, I play in Trials of Ascension. I've been married for 27 and a half years, so it's not the chicks, right? It sure the fuck ain't the money. I can tell you that right now.
You got money.
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully the books.
I'll tell you what's funny is like the CJ, our other guitarist. He is one of the higher upper management in at the Gigafactory at Tesla in Reno. Our drummer. Steve is a coder, a computer coder for the state, so makes a good chunk of change. And our singer Livy was a special needs teacher for a long time. Now she's doing other things, but she's very, very intelligent. Writes really good as well. But between all of us, what we make in the band is money-wise, there's no way we could ever do it professionally and give up our. You think I'm going to give up this job to go do that? So what we do is we basically create music and we'll play festivals and we'll play local gigs and stuff like that just because we enjoy doing it. So it's now a labor of love, but it was doing it because we want to make good music. And I think that's probably where a lot of people really need to get their heads. And that's in any creative endeavor, by the way, is to get out of your head and get out of the idea of like, oh, I'm going to do this to get laid. I'm going to do this to make money. Do it because you love to do it. And then if you're successful at it, great. If you're not, you're still happy and enjoying what you're doing. So why not just simply keep doing it? And you can apply that principle to so many different things. It doesn't have to be a band. It could be like whatever you enjoy doing, whether it's your hobbies or your profession or whatever else it is. So.
Yeah, what are the influences of your band? Because when I listened to the album, I was getting a little bit of Avenged Sevenfold, Trials of Ascension.
Oh, really?
I was getting like a little bit more metalcore vibe.
You did your homework. Fucking hey, man. Bravo. Thank you for doing that. We're more of a progressive metal band, I would say.
Okay, so more like Trivium.
If I have to, Trivium, definitely an influence. CJ really likes Dream Theater, of course. Okay. Nerd rock. Yeah. I'm more my influences are more like LA thrash. So I like Death Angel. I'm into like Anthrax. I'm
Tesla.
Well, that's more 80s. I like that stuff too. But like my influences, like when I was growing up, it was like early Metallica, Slayer's always been a big deal for me.
Punk bands? You like punk bands?
I love.
Did you go to punk shows?
I would go to punk shows. I would go see like 7 Seconds is one of my favorites. They're actually a Reno locals. But I like Circle Jerks. I like Dead Kennedys. I like the old school stuff like that. Exploited is good. There's some UK stuff that I like as well, but mostly Cali punk was
because Black Flag, when they released War and like the later albums, they got more into like sludge metal.
Yeah,
and like
Henry Rollins, man.
That's my shit. Henry Rollins is that dude, bro.
Henry Rollins is a freaking genius, and I don't think people think his politics are a little wonky. I get it, but like I think like intellectually, like smarts, intelligence wise, the dude's a fucking genius.
Yeah, I have a hard time even with just like some of the modern rock stars. Well, there's this book that I read, right? It's my favorite book ever. I'll send you a link.
But like, what modern bands are really around anymore? Like a lot of the stuff like
they're just replaying.
A lot of the stuff there's a really great band that I just started getting into, but then I find out I'm getting into it like 10 years after the band's already been out, right? But there's a band called Kill the Lights that I really fucking love right now. They're a really good band. If people were to ask me like what's in your playlist right now, Kill the Lights is in there. There's another band called Raven Age that I really like. I like stuff that has a good mid-range crunch. It's got to have like good guitars to it, but it also has to like the beats have to be something that like I can sort of get behind as well. So there's sort of a combination of things that I really dig on. But as far as the influences of our band, definitely Trivium, definitely. Steve would probably hit me for this, but like Five Finger Death Punch, I know he likes them.
Dillinger Escape Plan, do you like Dillinger?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of who else.
King Crimson at all?
Yeah, old school stuff I like. But my main bands were like Death Angel, Exodus, Anthrax, Metallica.
I was gonna ask you like, what do you think? Venom, like
Venom was great. But Venom was like one of the I kind of
shitty production, but good song.
I categorize Venom in sort of like the black metal thing. Man, that's right. You're from Ecuador, so it's like do you like Sepultura?
They're Brazilian, so like
Brazilian. Okay. Testament does a lot of South America.
I do like Testament.
Death Angel.
I do like Limp Bizkit. I do like Korn, right? Mm-hmm. I do like Hellhammer. What do you think about Hellhammer?
Good. Yeah. Do you like Cannibal Corpse?
Nah, I just can't remember the song.
I'm trying to think.
That's why I like Iron Maiden, because like they make a lot of good riffs, and you can remember the riffs. Like.
Yeah. But I like stuff like Livy is a great singer. She's got an 8-octave range. She's just a fantastic singer. So if you listen to, I'll tell you a funny story about her. When I first auditioned for the band, she wanted to show me how well she sang. Have you ever watched the movie Fifth Element with like Bruce Willis was in it and Mia Jovovich was in it and stuff like that? There's a part in there where there's what the diva Plava Laguna or whatever. I think that's her. She's the blue alien and she sings this really operatic kind of. It's almost like she gets into sort of like a house kind of beat that comes after it later. But she starts off by singing this very operatic kind of. Song. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And she sang that for me, like note for fucking note. I was like, yeah, I want to join this band. I'll definitely be in this band. So yeah, she's very, very talented when it comes to that. But so she can go from that really kind of like Lacuna Coil kind of sound to sounding like Ginger. Right, like just like go to a growl from like really operatic to a growl. We're kind of encouraging her and kind of directing her into doing more clean lyrics because for the first like 3, she does half and half, right? It'll be like very well sung, and then it'll go to like a Lamb of God kind of growl, like a Cookie Monster kind of thing. And I like that, but radio stations don't like that.
Yeah. What about 2000s rock, like the punk from 2000s?
You mean like Green Day or
like Fall Out Boy? Like
would you
that?
even consider
Not really.
Green Day punk? I guess in the early days
Nah, I
they
don't think
were.
so.
Like anything prior to Dookie was like, I would say it was punk.
I'll say Knuckle Puck's more punk, but
Yeah, like name some bands.
say like Evanescence.
Evanescence is not punk though.
No, wait, no. Evanescence is more like progressive metal. Kitty is like more like new metal.
Yeah, I would say. Are you familiar with any songs by Ginger?
Nah.
We actually were going in February of 2022. We were in the running to like open for Ginger at the Brewery House in Reno, and that was right when the Ukraine war started. And they're a Ukrainian band, so they had to cancel the tour and go back to the Ukraine to like help their families or some shit like that. We were like this close to opening for Ginger. I was like, God damn it. But I really like them. I like Lacuna Coil's pretty good. I mean, I'm trying to think of like female singers in bands and stuff like that. Definitely them.
The only one that gave up was obviously Paramore. But
Well, a lot of people say
Paramore's my shit, though.
Nightwish, and please don't say Nightwish.
I don't even know. I don't even know other female-led bands.
Yes.
Yo, what do you think of Gigi Allen? Like, I know that's Gigi Allen.
I don't know who that is.
He's like crazy guy. He never released an album, but he was like one of like the punk figureheads
In the 90s, 2000s.
I think he was like 80s,
80s,
90s.
If you name the band he was in, I could at least put a face to the voice. I liked. I'm trying to think of punk bands I was really into. 7 Seconds was my favorite.
Did you like the old ones? Like obviously Iggy Pop. You know, obviously
Yeah.
Dictators.
Yeah. Iggy Pop, people kept. The reason I had to
Iggy Pop was wild.
I had to start like taking TRT because people thought I looked like Iggy Pop without my shirt on.
Yo, there's this book where they have like all it's called the Please Kill Me Oral History of Punk Rock. That has like every single interview, like anecdote.
You know what you should watch?
That book is crazy.
There's two documentaries that came out during the 80s. There's one called The Decline and Fall of Western Civilization.
I was gonna ask you about that. I was about to say that. Those are my favorite
Part
movies.
2 was the metal years. Part 1 was the punk years.
What'd you think about?
I know.
What'd you think about 3?
The Youth Brigade was great.
What'd you think about Part 3?
Is there a part 3?
Decline of Civilization.
I didn't see part 3.
When they're doing the gutter punks. They're interviewing all the gutter punks.
I didn't even know there was a part 3. I only know that there was part 1 and 2. It's funny because now that I just remembered part 1, Social Distortion, back before they went really sort of pop, they were like, Mike Ness was really great. Suicidal Tendencies, fucking absolute. I'm trying to think of like Cali bands. Youth Brigade, I really liked. Fugazi was great.
Dude, Fugazi's my shit.
Yes.
Fugazi's my
yes.
shit. I'm mad that they don't have merch. Yo, Ian McKay, you don't have any merch.
Yes.
I'm about to make some merch.
Yes.
I fucking love Fugazi, man.
Yeah, Fugazi was great. I'm trying to think who else was good back then. Definitely, where was the other guys? There was I don't call it a documentary. I guess it was a documentary. There was a documentary on this this cable channel called Night Flight. And the documentary is called Another State of Mind, and they followed Social Distortion, and some Fugazi was in that as well, and Youth Brigade was in that, and they followed this tour that went from I think it was Southern California all the way up to Washington. It was just along the west coast of the United States, and it was when Mike Ness was like a raging alcoholic. And all the things that they had to do along the way, they rented a panel truck because they had to get their gear from L.A. all the way up to I think Seattle is where they ended up. Right. And then they met all these other bands along the way, and it was really kind of like a documentary of the punk scene. I think it was probably better than Declining Fall of Western Civilization Part 1, but it was good because it sort of you got inside the heads of the kids that were in that scene at that time. And what they really thought was going to happen with the music and where they thought they were going to go with
it. There's such a strong reflection when I saw those movies, and when I meet artists now, I'm like, okay, I see the delusion, but also it's like, oh, we're trying to become famous, and the ones that do become famous, it's like I just see so many parallels.
Well,
from both of those movies.
Well, here's what's interesting to me is being soon to be 56 years old. Okay. I can go I love Kiss. I saw Kiss when I was young, when I was 8 or 9 years old. Everyone was into Kiss back then. You had Kiss lunch boxes and shirts and everything else. And so Kiss was really my formal introduction to like rock and roll, like hard rock and roll. And then I got into Aerosmith. Then, of course, I'm people don't know this about me. I was born and raised in Pasadena, California. So you can't be born and raised in Pasadena, California without not loving Van Halen, because that's where they're from. So once I got a hold of Van Halen, everything was over, right? That's all I wanted to listen to was Eddie and everybody, the original Van Halen lineup. And then there was Randy Rhoads, who was also part of the Southern California scene, because he went from Quiet Riot over to Ozzy. And so that was kind of, you got to remember, I was maybe, let's see, I would have been, in 1980, I would have been 12 years old. So 1981, I'm 13. 1982, I'm 14. You ever watch Stranger Things? Those kids in there?
Yeah,
that was literally me. Literally
Eddie was
me.
you, right?
I graduated in 1986, which is where they left off on the last one. But that was literally me back then. And like Dungeons and Dragons, Iron Maiden, all these satanic rock bands, and you name it, I was into it, just like the kids in that show were. So I came up through like sort of 70s rock. I used to love Journey. I used to love REO Speedwagon. I loved Van Halen. You name it, I was probably into it. And then Motley Crue came out, because then the new kind of like the Hollywood metal scene was just starting to take off around like 82, 83. Slayer comes out 82, 83. And so it was a great time to be my age in the 80s, because all this new music was coming out, and it was just insanely good. So when we would listen to, like, say, Motley Crue, or we'd listen to Van Halen, or you'd listen to some of the bands that you probably associate with the metal bands you associate with the 80s, the thing is no one wanted to listen to anything from the 50s. No one wanted to listen to oldies. Nobody wanted to even, Jimi Hendrix people would listen to.
That's where they derived a lot of the sound from. Like, when I listen to New York Dolls, like they derive a lot from the Go-Go's from the 40s and shit.
Right. They didn't, but like, nobody listened to, unless you're like an old guy, you didn't listen to Buddy Holly. You didn't listen to the Beach Boys. You didn't listen to any of the old like 50s and 60s, Elvis Presley or the Beatles or any of that kind of stuff. You weren't really into that stuff, because that's what old people listen to. But if you think about it, from like the 70s to the 50s, you're only talking 20 years. And if you look from the 80s to the 60s, you're talking 20 years. Today, it is 2024, and people are still listening to Rain and Blood from like 1984, 1985. People still listen to music from like decades. 40 and 50 years prior. So when people, like you just mentioned Iron Maiden, how old are you? 25. You just mentioned Iron Maiden. My daughter knows Iron. My daughter knows Kiss songs, right? And she's 25 as well. And so but I'm talking about Kiss songs that are from 1975. Okay. Yeah. So you're looking at almost 50 years. And so what's happened in music where we go, you know what? Anything new that's happening right now ain't all that great. Why does it suck so bad that I want to go back and listen?
And then you
want to go listen to The Trooper from 1980.
And then you readapt. That's what I see a pattern. Like, you readapt songs from like 20 years old. Right now we're having that resurgence of like 2000s, right? Everybody likes new metal again. It's like,
you want me? Since we're getting towards the end here, I'll make a prediction for you. I think a lot of the music today is too easy to produce. Remember what I was telling you? Like when I was coming up and cutting my teeth in the Hollywood metal scene.
You got tapes. You got to cut.
You had it. Well, you had to do that. But one of the reasons why I did flyers for other bands was so that I could pay for studio time to go cut a demo cassette tape, because there were no fucking CDs back then. The CDs came later, but you'd have to go back, and you had to know your music. You had to know somebody in the industry too, because you needed a good producer even to get a demo tape done, so you could get gigs. And so hopefully an A&R person would cut. So that, and again, that's the business side of it. So an A&R person would take you seriously, and maybe you had enough money to put 2 or 3 songs on a demo tape, because like $800, which I don't even think twice about today, was like, it might as well been $10,000 to me back then. So coming up with the money, getting into the studio, mastering your craft, mastering songwriting, mastering your instrument, mastering everything, and hoping to God that it's going to get to the right person and in the right ears. All of that built up to that is gone in the 21st century.
Yeah, that's why you hear like these bands like Black Sabbath or like Sex Pistols are like, oh, we went in the studio, we gotta bang the whole album out in like 12 hours.
Well,
right?
yeah, and then so like I'm from an era where you had to have a rehearsal studio. All your equipment is there. You go into the studio and you write with your best friends. You sit there and you write the music. Today, we
email each other.
We do, right? Trial of Ascension, like one of the reasons I'm able to stay in Trial of Ascension while I'm here in Las Vegas is because of the internet. So there is an advantage. I'm not going to say there isn't, but we also have a rehearsal studio in Reno, and we've had it for almost 5 years. Well, they probably had it for longer, but since I've been in the band, about 4.5, 5 years, right? One of the things I insisted on from the very beginning was we can write individually, but when we get together collectively, we still need to have this rehearsal space. We still need to have this time together so we can learn to perform as a unit and as a band. It's one thing to like be able to write really good music. It's another thing to perform that music. So when we get there and we tighten everything up and we say, this is what we're going to sound like live, that's why we have the rehearsal studio. I like to go back to my roots, which is I would much rather have CJ, Steve, Livy, and everybody else in the room, and we're gonna write something. Let's do something new today. Let's make a collective effort to make something new. But I think one of the reasons why rap music right now is so prevalent is because it's dirt easy to make. All you need is loops. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not talent to it or there's no art. There is, absolutely. House music. The kind of stuff you hear at Zook, the kind of stuff that you hear, like, that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that there's not a talent to it. There absolutely is, and it's probably a lot of work for them as well. But when you think about it in comparison to putting together a band, forming a band, and doing all the things that are necessary for you to have that, and then there's no payoff for it, because Spotify basically gives you like fractions of a penny on the
like
dollar.
0.000 something.
Like I understand, because the barrier to entry back in the 80s was you had to be so fucking talented and you had to look like a fucking supermodel and you had to have everything perfect for you. There was a barrier to entry. Now the barrier to entry has been lowered, but the reward or the incentive to get into it in the first place is practically gone right now. So you have to be honest about it, and you actually have to love, like I said before, do it because you love it, not because Spotify ain't gonna pay you jack shit. And Apple, iTunes, and everybody else they got this thing, there has to be, at some point, somebody's gonna break that monopoly. I don't know when that's gonna happen. But when the monopoly gets broken on Spotify and Apple Tunes and whatever it is, where they're paying you like pennies on each replay, when the first person who can take that and put the money back into the pockets of the musicians, that's when you're going to see music actually come back and people are going to start playing some really good shit, because they're already playing good shit. You're just not hearing it because Spotify doesn't want to play anything except Taylor Swift and fucking Drake and whatever else is popular at that particular time, because those forms of music are very easy to produce and very easy to make. So at least that's my working theory at this point.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to support your local musicians. You need to go to Vamped. You need to go to where people are making new music and get into it, because it's up to the listener to educate themselves to have the desire to want to listen to new music instead of just what's ever being showing up in their feed. Yeah,
man. So we'll see how music goes, man, and then also hopefully I can catch you guys live at some point. And before we close this out, I want to point where's the camera to me. To this one, right? I want to say, if you want to criticize, because I came when you guys had Fresh and Fit on, so if you guys want to criticize anything, any person that you deem controversial, you want to defend your idea, you want to call them out, and if you're too coward and you can't call them out, you shut the fuck up, all right? You show up here and you defend your ideas, and that's what you fucking do, motherfuckers. All right, Rollo, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to catch you later. Thank you for coming in.
Good interview.
And allowing me to interview you, man.
Excellent, man.